Being revolutionary has always been in Apple's DNA, and it's probably why they're regarded by many as the premier player in the mobile market. The iPhone has remained a constant force in the industry, not only for the prestige and reputation that precedes it, but also for its ability to just work. I know, it's a cliche tagline, but it has merit. This year's iPhone 7 is a courageous ambition for a company that's known to start trends. The culture surrounding the iPhone is unlike anything else in the space. So when Apple does something bold that brings about apprehension, you know it's going to cause a huge ruckus. Apple claims it takes the courage to move on, do something new that betters all of us. Change is a tough thing to accept, so this year's model will be scrutinized deliberately more than previous ones, just because of its defiance. Okay, so let's talk about the most pressing matter here with the iPhone 7, and that's the lack of a headphone jack. It's not the first time we've seen it in the phone, but being the iPhone, it's going to cause a lot more commotion. And while they do manage to slim down the overall size of the phone, so it's thinner, it's lighter, it just doesn't have the same convenience factor as before. So that means you just can't pick up your headphones and plug them in. You can use the included pair of Lightning headphones or use the adapter to use your own pair. But then there's the matter of keeping that adapter on you at all times. There's also the conundrum of using a pair of headphones while charging, so you'll need to buy a totally different adapter for that. Yes, it's a shock, and while the Moto Z forgo the jack as well, it didn't face nearly the same level of scrutiny. Again, the trade-offs for removing the jack here ensures a slimmer overall package. It sucks now and makes it less convenient, but it's a change we're going to be forced to accept. Beyond that, the phone still has the iconic characteristics of iPhone's past. It's a subtle change over the iPhone 6 and 6S, but Apple deserves some credit for bringing water resistance to a unibody metal phone. And we certainly know some of the engineering obstacles in doing that, so kudos to them for it. The IP67 water resistance means that it'll withstand splashes and whatnot, but Apple's careful to mention in the fine print that full submersion is not recommended. In fact, it deliberately says that splash, water, and dust resistance are not permanent conditions, and resistance might decrease as a result of normal wear. The 7000 series aluminum looks and feels great. Apple also introduces two new colors to the mix, black and jet black. We were a bit surprised by how the jet black is a fingerprint magnet for smudges, but it kills us that it feels more plastic than metal. So to that degree, it doesn't feel as premium as the other finishes. We're more content with the matte black variant that we have here, which we feel offers more cohesiveness with its design. The antenna lines, for example, are now so subtle that you can barely see them. All these new additions make an evolutionary design worthy of praise, but it's still controversial. Not much has changed with the specs of the iPhone 7's Retina display. It has the same size and resolution, so that's a 4.7-inch LED backlit IPS LCD screen with a resolution of 750 by 1334 pixels. The pixel density count comes out to approximately 326 ppi. Now that doesn't sound like a whole lot, especially in the Quad HD era, but it still proves in being effective for reading text, watching videos, and surfing the web. Specs aside, the Retina display exhibits qualities that make it usable in practical everyday situations. Visibility on sunny days is no concern since it reaches a maximum luminance of 620 nits, and you also get wide viewing angles. However, its color temperature is a smidgen colder at 7366 Kelvin, which gives the color white a subtle bluish tinge. And while Apple touts the screen's wider color gamut, we see a few anomalies with its color accuracy in the sRGB color spectrum chart. It's not bad at all, given how blue, teal, and green seem to hit their reference points, but there are subtle deficiencies with magenta, red, and yellow. Luckily, it's not bad to the point that colors are totally unrealistic. This is a crazy fast phone, and just like Apple mentions, it's the most powerful iPhone to date. Under the hood, there's a new quad-core Apple A10 Fusion chipset coupled with 2GB RAM and the M10 Motion co-processor. Now the A10 Fusion breaks down to 4 cores, 2 high-performance cores and 2 high-efficiency ones. All in all, Apple proclaims it to be 2 times faster than the iPhone 6, but it doesn't take us long to realize its snappiness for ourselves. Consistency has always been a thing with the iPhone, and with the A10 Fusion chipset, It's just crazy how fast this phone is. It's snappy, it's fast, whether you're doing basic stuff like surfing the web, opening up apps, you get a sense of responsiveness with pretty much everything. And over in the gaming department, it's a beast. Games move at a good frame rate and very few hiccups. And in some of the benchmark tests, the graphics benchmark test we were running, it was running at a steady 60 frames per second. So this thing is a monster. It was always annoying to know that the base model of the iPhone was 16 gigabytes, but they thankfully upgraded it to 32 gigabytes. We doubt Apple will ever bring expandable storage to the iPhone, so you can say this is consolation. Besides that, you also have the 128 gigabyte and 250 gigabyte capacities rounding out the other two variants. The home button sees a big change here with the iPhone 7 because it's no longer mechanical. Instead, it leverages the same haptic feedback used by Apple's 3D Touch technology. It feels weird at first, but we eventually got adjusted to it. We'll say that it was annoying that it initially required us to push the home button to unlock the phone. But after some sniffing around in the accessibility section of the settings, you can make it so that you can just rest your finger to unlock the phone with Touch ID. Speaking of 3D Touch, it's again here with the Retina display. Some people use it, others don't. It's a matter of just getting adjusted to the whole process. Now, the nice thing about it is that it does streamline many of the stuff you'd normally do by accessing an app, going through some menus and whatnot. So in that way, it does streamline the process. Some people like that. And when it comes to the note-taking experience though, it does recognize varying degrees of pressure, but it's not as practical to use like the S Pen with the Galaxy devices because it's tougher in the way you do it. And lastly, the iPhone 7 sees the introduction of stereo speakers, a first for the line. The usual speaker at the bottom edge of the phone is still there, but the earpiece is leveraged to produce stereo sound. It complements watching videos, even better when there's a substantial amount of power out of it. However, there's some sharpness with the quality at the loudest setting, so it's better to notch it down a few levels. Reading into the specs once again, the camera doesn't seem to be all that different. With the iPhone 7 Plus on the other hand, its configuration makes it the more compelling of the two. Okay, so the iPhone 7 is fashioned with an upgraded 12 megapixel rear camera. The new changes include its wider f1.8 aperture lens, a quad LED True Tone flash, and most importantly, optical image stabilization. We feel that's the most compelling part because OIS was reserved only to the 6S Plus last year. Meanwhile, the front-facing camera gets upgraded to a 7 megapixel one. Frankly, it's a small upgrade when you think about it. Now, the beauty of the iPhone is that it makes taking photos a snap. There's not much thought or process behind it. The camera interface is simplified to only offer the most basic functions. At the same time though, the lack of finer controls means that you're going to be forced to download third-party camera apps. Yes, you do have the usual modes such as panoramic, burst, time-lapse, live photos, and filters, but forget about controls and modes that would appeal more to enthusiasts. For example, it's just a pain to change the video recording resolution, since you have to exit the camera app and then change them in the general settings menu. It's a pain, and it's one annoyance we have with the experience. We'll quickly sum it up by saying that the iPhone 7 is an excellent shooter, an all-around performer you can say. If you're coming up from an iPhone 6S, you probably won't notice a whole lot unless you really look into the shots. When lighting's abundant, you get sharp details, proper exposure, and neutral tone colors. However, in brighter areas of the shot, it tends to overexpose them, hiding the details in the process. That's when the HDR mode comes to mind, to tone down the areas that are under and overexposed in the scene. It basically neutralizes the shot without appearing too artificially produced at the end. The end result is an image with proper exposure, as highlights and shadows are appropriately adjusted to draw out the details. Panoramics have always been a strong point for the iPhone, and it does well yet again here with its stitching process. Selfies with the 7 megapixel camera carry a fair amount of details capture when the conditions are ideal, as well as illustrating a pleasant level of contrast. It seems, however, that its color reproduction seems to favor a slightly warmer tone. Under low light, the camera brightens up the shot to expose details that are otherwise lost. There's obviously not as much detail here, often appearing more speckled and soft, but shots still manage to come out decently exposed, including when lighting is almost non-existent. It's even more impressive that noise is kept to a minimum. But the drawbacks here is just the softer composition of the shot and a duller tone with the colors. The iPhone 7 is also superb with video recording. The addition of optical image stabilization makes a world of difference, seeing that the footage is significantly more stable. We see the difference right away from the moment we started shooting video, both 4K and Full HD. It helps too that it's rich in detail and clarity, without being too over-sharpened. Low-light performance is commendable, but there's still some subtle presence of noise and an overall softer production. The iPhone 7 still captures some sweet slow-motion footage, but the frame rates don't change from what we were given with the iPhone 6s. So what else can I say about the camera here with the iPhone 7? It's an excellent all-around performer. It takes superb photos and videos, and the nice thing about it, it's simple and straightforward. But at the same time though, when it comes to camera enthusiasts, they're gonna find the iPhone 7 lacking in that area, so they'll probably want to look elsewhere. With its latest mobile platform, iOS 10, Apple has tweaked the OS accordingly, but it's still the same iOS experience at its core that we've been exposed to with the last few iterations. On the surface, the look and feel is a familiar one, with the usual grid-like arrangement of the home screen. Apple's implementation for widgets is still a far cry from what Android offers, but the platform continues to favor simplicity above everything else. It's apparent that Apple has an affinity to rounded edges, evident in not only how the icons appear on the home screen, but also in the way notification windows look. There's also a sense of depth, like in how the home screen has that out-of-focus look when the notifications panels pull down and revealed. Yes, the core features are still present here with the latest iteration of iOS. Where it pales in comparison to Android, however, is in the area of productivity and multitasking. While you can still move in and out of apps by double pressing the home button, there's still no true side-by-side apps multitasking with the experience. Unofficially, there's a 1960 mAh battery stuffed into its felt casing, up from its predecessor's tally of 1715 mAh. Even with the slimmer chassis, they were able to include a bigger battery. For being a high-end smartphone, it certainly delivers the same kind of longevity we get in other flagships. In fact, a fully charged battery easily carries us over a single day of normal usage, which still has enough gas in the tank to get us through the start of the next morning. While charging, it takes 150 minutes before it's back to full capacity. It's not fast, nor is it slow. Essentially, the battery's better than its predecessor, but we wouldn't go far to say it's the best in its class either. When it comes to handling phone calls, it suffices for the most part on both ends of the line. Better on our end, though. That's because of the strong volume output of the earpiece, which allows us to discern voices in the noisiest of conditions. And when you use a speakerphone, the combination of the two speakers allows voices to maintain their integrity. The other end line is a different story though, just because the mics seem to distort voices, sounding muffled in a way. Apple has never shifted from its strategy when it comes to pricing its new iPhones. The same configurations are still present here, as the iPhone 7's price starts at $649 for the 32GB model and $100 separating the different storage options. We'd personally recommend the 128GB model, seeing that 32GB is just too skimpy for a phone that has no storage expansion. Apple paints a convincing picture with its new iPhone. For starters, the new redesign is impressive on so many levels, boasting a skinnier profile than ever before, while also bringing water resistance protection. They've added stereo sound in the process too, while the new A10 Fusion chipset has proven to be a knockout champ in terms of its processing performance. Nearly every facet of the iPhone 7 has been upgraded in some capacity. However, the lack of a headphone jack is still the biggest concern and contention. You can't say it's a thorn on its side, as it forces consumers to do one of two things: go wireless or use the adapter. Wireless would incur an additional cost, but the adapter means making sure you keep it safe when it's not being used. It's an inconvenience to say the least, but this controversy is going to end up being an afterthought because change is inevitable, especially in the smartphone market. It sucks now, but it's just one small piece to a larger puzzle that is the iPhone 7. When it comes to what consumers want in a smartphone, the iPhone 7 hits the mark in many categories. Yes, it doesn't have the army of features we get in the Samsung Galaxy S7 or Note 7, nor does it have the same camera-centric controls of the LG V20, but the iPhone 7 does exactly what the iPhone 7 needs to do, and that's being a simple, hassle-free smartphone that doesn't overwhelm. It's a solid smartphone worthy of consideration, mainly because its status of being an all-around performer is undeniably what makes it a force to be reckoned with in the space. So that is our iPhone 7 review, guys. So I hope you liked it. I know the headphone jack thing, it's still crazy, it's a mess, but it is what it is. So if you want to learn more about the iPhone 7, check out our website, tabtimes.com. This is John V, signing out.